Description of myself, and I'll ask all our panelists to do the same. I'm a white woman. I'm very tall, although I'm sat down. We're all on black chairs, and we're in a row up against a big white puffy screen. I've got short blonde hair and glasses. We've got an absolutely incredible lineup of women in front of you who are going to be delivering some amazing pieces of information and hopefully providing a bit of inside scoop on what's going on in legislation, law and hate crime at the moment in relation to disability. So what I'm going to ask everybody to do is we'll go along the line and everybody will introduce themselves. To start myself, as I've got a microphone. My name is Celia. I'm the founder of the first policy unit in the UK which focuses on disability and accessibility. I design policy, legislation, and I work with politicians to reform legislation. My background is law, and I'm a disabled woman myself. So we'll start at the end if you want to kick us off.
Hi, I'm Alexanddrou. I work at the National Crime Agency, so I'm a civil servant. I was born with my illness, so I've had chronic illness, kidney failure, kidney disease. I'm on dialysis at the moment. I have long brown hair, I would say, brown eyes, olive skin, fair skin, I would say a bit yellowy actually because I've got, I'm on dialysis, so it's a bit yellowy. I'm wearing a blue and white dress. There's a reason for that because I'm Greek, so I wanted to hold the flags of the Greek colours, and I'm wearing white shoes.
Hi, I'm Jody. I'm part of the Association of Disabled Lawyers along with Christina. I'm a law student training to be towards the bar eventually, if they let me in. I'm also an author. I think I look, again, my presentation is, I think I have good clothes on, I have dark hair. I'm a female-ish, if you look at me, it depends on the day, as long as I've, shaved. There you go.
Hi everyone, I'm Christina Warner. I'm a barrister. I specialise in family matters concerning domestic abuse, in particular those of the LGBTQ+, Latinx and disabled communities. I was a solicitor beforehand, and I've been a magistrate for about 15 years. I'm also losing my eyesight to Stargardt's. I am a Mediterranean woman. I've got long brown hair. I'm wearing an orange top, black trousers, and Larry fluoro pink shoes.
Hi everyone, I'm Anna Landre. A visual description of myself is that I'm a young white woman with shoulder-length brown hair. I'm wearing a black t-shirt that says, "The future is accessible," and I'm wearing light green trousers. I work at the Global Disability Innovation Hub as a researcher, and I'm also doing a PhD there. I often work in implementation of disability law and policy, so the space between where the law gets passed and where it impacts all of our lives. Particularly, I work in architectural barriers, in the humanitarian sector, and in social care policy.
Hi, I'm Sandie Roberts. My visual description is I'm a queer white human, presenting as a female today with short silver hair, blue eyes, fabulous green animal print dress and black trainers. I have white tan skin. I am a disability advocate, content creator and model, and I'm here today to talk about my online experience of sexual harassment.
Thank you so much. I think we can all agree an incredible lineup of people in front of us who are all offering a very diverse perspective on what we're going to be talking about today. So the first question I wanted to kick off with is around the legislation and the protections that we have as disabled people in this country. So one of the things that I think is quite common in the thread across the world is how vague and open to interpretation law can be. And that is, as the lawyers to my left will know, both a brilliant thing and incredibly negative thing. So to give an example, and you'll know this working in architecture, there's something called Document M, which stipulates around the accessibility of buildings, which is a guidance, it's not compulsory. So my first question to the panelists would be, what existing legislation do you think needs updating? So looking at things like the Equality Act or regulations we have around buildings, or what new law would you like to see introduced to protect people. So Sandie, starting with you around kind of internet hate crime and the experiences that you've had, what would you like to see happen to better protect disabled people online, for example?
I would like it to be illegal for people to come into your space and say the things that they do at the moment. Because of where we are, I can't say what happens to me, but use your imaginations, and it's explicit 18 rated things, and I would like it to be illegal, and it's not currently illegal for that to happen. And I would like there to be safety guards in place that we could protect ourselves, and that's not there either. And it's not, the platforms that we're on are not legally obliged to put those things in place, and I think that should be a legal requirement as well.
Yeah, I often caution against new legislation because I think the existing legislation that we have is itself not implemented. And instead, often I tell people that we should be looking at regulation. Regulation is a really neglected area of disability activism and policy, and often has those really key measures and prescriptions that are actually going to make a difference for us. And they're often easier to change, which as activists is really important to realize. I also think pushing for new legislation often gives politicians an excuse to look like they're doing something where they often aren't. You know, there's a lot of fanfare about new laws. They kind of get, oh, I helped sponsor XYZ bill, and we passed it, and there's no follow-up into getting those bills impacting our actual daily lives. And I think that's true across a lot of regulation, or across a lot of laws that don't have the proper regulation. So I would say that I would caution us against a lot of just looking towards new legislation.
I think for myself, the answer would be looking at the regulations and the laws that we already have, quite similar to you, and looking at how those can be amended. So I don't know if any of you are aware, but the Down syndrome bill was recently redeveloped, led by Dr. Liam Fox MP. It's been happening over the last couple of years. And the reason that happened, which is sad to think about the origins, is the fact that previously when that law was invented, individuals who identify with Down syndrome typically weren't going to live past a certain age, and therefore their care was stopping immediately in the halts, and they were being left in society with no help and no legal protection to be able to access that help. So a new legislation and an amendment has come in that has extended the protections that individuals have, and it's been brilliant to see. So from my perspective, it'd be looking at what we've already got and making it more cemented and bringing it up to date. If we look at the Equality Act, that's from 2010, so we're already 13 years out of date in terms of the Equality Act. When that piece of legislation was made, for example, mental health and our understanding of personality disorders and the severity of mental health and anxiety, that wasn't something we understood as a society back then, even though it was only 13 years ago. So the Equality Act in itself doesn't reflect disability that might incorporate more hidden disabilities. So for me, it would be looking at what we've got and making sure that we are really keeping on top of updating those legislations. Christina.
I would say, as a practitioner dealing with the issue from the inside, so within legal practice, I would argue that there needs to be training for all members of the judiciary when it comes to issues surrounding disability. So I have found that representing disabled clients, there's a distinct lack of understanding as to their needs when it comes to, for instance, them giving evidence. So although it's not technically a legislative issue, it's an issue of training within the judiciary. And I would also argue that I think all lawyers, as part of their training or as part of either the vocational part of their training or the academic part of their training, to have a much greater understanding of the needs of the disabled community. Because, as we all know, our life experience affects the quality of the evidence that we give. And I would say that disabled people, we also bring a different perspective and we're challenged in different ways. And I would say from experience as a legal practitioner, the judiciary they're not grasping the challenges that we face, and in turn the special measures or the special the recourses that we need in order to ensure that our clients are represented properly, our disabled clients are heard appropriately. So I would say tackling the issue from the inside within legal practice is something that desperately needs to be looked at. Similarly, as the Domestic Abuse Bill now Act has tackled some issues as to how the family courts in particular deal with victims of domestic abuse, I think we need something separate that deals with and really challenges how the judiciary and the court system as a whole assists or fails to assist disabled people when they're trying to access the justice system. From, if we're thinking about it from a criminal perspective, from the point of arrest all the way through to litigation and court proceedings.
It's a hard one to follow. From an ex-police officer's perspective, from a hate crime perspective, is that basically hate crime is a crime with a hate added to it. Police don't understand that. As a hate crime victim myself, having been a police officer, they're not trained in this. They don't understand it. There's no clear understanding, for example, because I work with the Advocacy Forum for Victim Support is hate crime. And we found there were barriers to reporting, for example, the way that police officers deal with vulnerable victims. It's victim blaming more than actually victim assistance. They also really struggle with people with neurodiversity. They see that as aggression a lot of the time, or non-believable witnesses is the term that comes up a lot. Something that does need to change, especially because a lot of hate crime in the community is next to neighbours in a community setting, is there does need to be an addition to perhaps a Domestic Abuse Act, is that when you live that close to a neighbour, sometimes you're in such an intimate relationship with them, especially through lockdown, that coercive and controlling behaviour, especially malicious reporting, most disabled people probably get reported to the DWP, I don't know how many times, because they don't understand, is that needs to be registered at a local government level so that people are protected, so you no longer have to keep proving your innocence. From the Equality Act perspective, I'd just like to see the word reasonable taken out of the sentence. I am disabled. These are my needs. Please address them. You might not be able to monetary-wise. Okay, we can't always change an ancient building, but there are always temporary ramps. There's always a way. Just ask a disabled person. You don't need to ask a surveyor. You've got us.
So for me, it's from my past experience, basically. It's on the topic of policy. So I don't know if anyone remembers the two-tick scheme. The two-tick scheme. Yeah, you remember it. So it is quite, it's only recently that it was scrapped. I went to Cass Business School myself, and it just so happens to be a professor at Cass Business School. He did 10 years research while the two-tick scheme was on, and he proved that it's completely useless. And I'm one of those people that fell into that 10 years of struggling with a career. So I can tell you that for 10 years I was struggling. You come out of Cass Business School with a master's degree and you're struggling, and you're one of 2% that get a job. That just doesn't make sense. So when the Disability Confidence Act came in, I thought, great, but I'm waiting to see, and I'm still waiting to see how it's going to feel for other people, because now I have a job. I'm at the National Crime Agency, and I don't know what it's going to be like. And I would like to see research as to what's going to happen with that, because in my opinion, it's just another name for the same thing. I feel that when the Act came out in 2016, where it was a policy that government said they will support 1 million disabled people into work, certain wording was not correct, and I wasn't okay with it. But disregarding that, I feel that they're achieving their goal not because they're working on it, but because the pandemic happened. we as disabled people rode the wave like hell when society realized for average person that you should be offering flexible working, part-time, hybrid working, things that I was told were not possible. I had to do 37 hours a week plus dialysis, which is another 20 hours a week on top of that. And I feel legislation shouldn't have to be just considered for the average person. There should be some legislation in place that picks up and says, okay, people with disabilities, there are certain requirements, and in legislation there should be mention of flexibility, hybrid, part-time working. I remember when I used to call agencies, when you're ready to work full-time, come back because we only do full-time. How am I ever going to be ready to work full-time? I do dialysis 20 to 30 hours a week. And I always insisted to put my foot down and say, no, I will wait for the part-time job. One other aspect is when I did wait for the part-time job and I did get it, it was just something that I just grabbed. It fell in my lap. Not something I enjoyed, not something I was happy with. Turned out the company was discriminatory. I had to go to a certain, well, let's just say, I can't say too much legally. I had to do something about that just when the pandemic happened. And I had to leave. I lost all my confidence. I lost my hair. I took medication, and the only way I felt that the legal system was supporting me was because I also had the Shore Trust. So please, one of the things that people with disabilities need to know is that there are organizations out there that will give you legal support, and Shore Trust has legal support. Just to mention that. In terms of being in the National Crime Agency, because this is a crime environment, from my experience, I now have an amazing job and I love it and it's my dream job and everything. I would say that there is good legal support when it comes to working for the civil service. Because you cannot, as a government, say that you've got Disability Discrimination Act and not apply it. And if people with disabilities are discriminated against, then that is a big problem for the ministries. If the National Crime Agency did anything, that would be really terrible news. And reputation for the ministries is very important. So that's a good aspect of law and the Discrimination Act. Like in the civil service, you are more likely to be able to get a job, and if there's any problem with disability, you are supported.
Thank you very much for all of your answers. The next question I'm going to call on specifically Christina and Sandie, which is around access to law. As disabled people, when we flag up that something has happened to us, both from a legal perspective and whether we're going to a lawyer, we're going to the judicial system, or whether we're going directly to an organisation to call out behaviour that has happened to us, and we're trying to seek support, we're trying to get somebody banned from social media or to flag behaviour, or whether we're actually going down the legislation route, what can we be doing better as a society from an organisational perspective and from a judicial perspective to make sure that disabled people have better access to legislation? Because I know, working in policy and law and legislation, that time and time again I know my rights have been violated, but I don't know where to get funding. I don't know how to navigate the legal system. I might be non-verbal. I don't know how. I can't stand up in court and express myself. And I go to a lawyer and they instantly say, well, then you've got no case. I'm sorry. So how can we make sure that the legal system and organisations are better supporting people that feel like they have been discriminated against or been subject to a hate crime?
That's a really big question, because I don't feel that the online world is a very safe place for the disabled community. It's not a very safe place to have a business, which is my business is online. So at the moment, the response from all the platforms is to put your account to private if you have a problem with being online. But if your business is online, then you cannot do that. Which means that they're effectively telling you to shut your shop, and you cannot do that. So the access to support is very convoluted, and at the moment all of the onus and pressure is on you to prove that this has happened. And I know that I have cognitive difficulties, and when I recently reported my nearly 3 years of sexual harassment, they wanted evidence that this had happened to me, which was upsetting but also traumatizing, because I had to go into that place and find all the evidence, look at it, screenshot it, re-traumatize myself just to give it to them. And I think that there was no consideration over how that would make me feel. So what we really need is, ideally, a massive button somewhere, or a setting somewhere that's very clear, very accessible, some kind of place that the community can go to when there's a problem, that's a big SOS button. There is a problem, I need help, it's going to take me direct to the help that I need, and I will not have to do the work, because I'm the person who needs the support. Don't make me do it. You have the training, you know your platforms, you know what the capabilities of the technology are. I don't know how to turn it off, and don't make me get re-traumatized by it. It's just a terrible situation to be in. And then even when you do give the evidence, if it doesn't meet their legal requirements for stalking or abuse, then they say there's nothing they can do, put your account to private, and that's the problem. So I don't actually know, but in my dream world, it would be to have a big SOS button that is accessible in all the kinds of ways.
Thank you. I think having that kind of accessible support is really, really important, and making sure that the support system that's in place for organisations can be adjusted to meet individual circumstances, that it's not a blanket approach. It's not you're not talking to a computer, that you're talking to an individual who understands what's happened and has that real care and knowledge of what needs to be done to make adjustments for individual situations. Thank you very much, Sandie. Christina, from a judicial perspective.
Well, I'd say when accessing the justice system, I think I'm being cut off. What I'm saying is too controversial. Let me give that one to you. Cheers. I'd say that when accessing the justice system is a twofold issue. The first is procedural access. Access to procedure and legislation, so that's an academic issue almost, and then academic in the perspective of content of information, and then we've got the practical aspect of actually getting into a courtroom, getting into a police station, getting into a law firm, speak to a solicitor or see your barrister. So if I start with the latter first, there is a movement at the moment at the bar within barristers practice, where a lot of barristers, where we practice is called chambers, a lot of them are grade listed buildings. So if you have any type of mobility challenge or a sensory challenge, such as myself, someone who's visually impaired, physically getting into a set of chambers can be extremely difficult. The same can be said for a lot of tribunals and courtrooms, because a lot of court buildings are grade listed also. So they have steps, and I can tell you a lot of those court buildings do not have nosing. They don't have fluorescent nosing. So it always makes for, literally from the door of the court, it can be very difficult to access the system because you physically can't get in. Often there is a lack of signposting. There's a lack of hearing loops. There's a lack of functioning light bulbs if you're someone that's visually impaired, or someone that's neurodiverse and is affected by different lighting. That can be very challenging as well. It can take a long time to get BSL assistance. So that's from a practical perspective as a disabled person, and I've tried to cover obviously the cognitive, mobility, sensory, as many aspects of disability as I can. Obviously it's a very unique experience to all of us, but physically being able to access a court building, a police station, a law office, barristers' chambers can be colossally difficult. that's something that certainly needs to change. There is a movement within barristers and solicitors where we're fighting and we're shouting loud. We're saying this is not good enough. We need to, as 25% of the world's population is disabled or identifies as such, that must be reflected in accessibility to the justice system. It's a pillar of democracy. There's no reason at all why someone should be deprived from being able to have access to justice. In terms of a procedural perspective, I think that might be an organizational issue. I think access to information, there are great websites such as, I think you mentioned in the previous talk, legislation.gov.uk, but then interpreting the law, it's a language in itself. And disabled people, we slip through the cracks when it comes to legal aid being the public funding that's available for those that are of low income and aren't able to afford their own legal representation. A lot of us slip through the cracks. So how are you meant to interpret law when the language is so complicated that even someone who wasn't under pressure or suffering anxiety because they're subject to legislation or litigation, how are they meant to interpret that? Personally, I think that's a lack of funding when it comes to social work, when it comes to community care, when it comes to citizens' advice. It's a multifaceted issue. There's simply no funding available, and there bloody well should be.
Thank you.
So I don't know if that
we
helps.
can all agree on what you've just said there. We have to have quite a short session this session because we are running significantly over time. So what I want to do is quickly go round to each of our panellists. And the final thing that I want to end on, which I think is a topic, we've had a great conversation about legalities and structures and organisations. But actually what I want to do is each of our panellists give one piece of advice, 30 seconds to a minute, about if you as an individual out there have experienced a hate crime or if you experienced something on the grounds of your disability, what advice would you give? What action should you take? And what, or anything you can offer would be there. And we'll go around sort of 30 seconds to a minute each. Sandie, I'll start with you at the end. Or do you want me to go the other way, or you have to start?
Go first if you want. Do you want me to go first?
I don't have any boards and people or any of that. All I can say is that if it does happen to you, as it has happened to me, don't think it's your fault. Don't internalize it. Don't keep it secret. Talk about it, share it, and ask for help. Because the worst thing you can do is think that you shouldn't be doing what you're doing, that you should shrink and hide yourself away. Don't do that. So that's my advice.
Yeah, my advice is often to talk to other disabled people about it. I think it can, one, be very cathartic to be able to discuss these things with people who get it. Some of my biggest strength and able to kind of continue moving as an activist, as a policymaker, is in communing with other disabled people about it. Because our challenges might not be exactly the same, particularly if our disabilities are a bit different, but it's a shared experience. And also, we have put together a hell of a lot of knowledge on how to handle it. And particularly in me, for me, as someone who grew up in the US and moved to the UK, I've been brought into an entirely different legal system when it comes to disability. And growing up disabled, I learned the US system, learned how to navigate it, learned the buzzwords to say when someone does violate your rights to try and get them to remedy that, and then what to do if they don't. And here it's entirely new. And the reason I've been able to handle it so well is by learning from those around me. And I think even if you did grow up here, there's a lot that can be learned, little tips and tricks and strategies. And, oh, I know a really good solicitor, just reach out to her, email her. She's great, she knows how to do it. You won't have to do anything after that. Or, oh, that happened to me when I was in school. Let me send you the language that made them, change their behavior. So compare notes with one another. Build community. It's helpful. It's also really fun. And that's my advice.
Thank you, Anna. My advice would be, if you take anything away from this, is remember one phrase, is that accessibility is a right, not a privilege. your right to be included, your right to be considered, your rights that you have as an individual are just as valid as anybody else. As disabled people, we always say, oh, there's not money for it. I completely understand. Or, you're not quite there yet. I completely get it. No, it's not acceptable. It's 2023, and we cannot continue with a culture of excuses. Jody, you were talking about removing the word reasonable. I still get it now as a disabled person, that internalized ableism, that I feel grateful when someone makes accessibility provisions for me and I say thank you over and over again. I have to stop doing that as a person, because even I'm guilty of sometimes falling into that trap of feeling so grateful and happy when people do things for me. They're going above and beyond. They're not going above and beyond. And when people talk to you and they're using language that's unacceptable, I'm not one for cancel culture. I'm one for, if somebody says something that I don't agree with and I believe is discriminatory, that is a moment of education. It's not a moment for anger. If somebody still doesn't get it and they make the same mistakes over and over again, then to hell with you, goodbye. But in that first instance, it's an opportunity to educate people, because there may be a lack of awareness, and I think that's a very vapid statement sometimes. But remember that accessibility is a right, it's not a privilege, and you shouldn't feel grateful or thankful when somebody implements adjustments for you as an individual. You are just as valid as anybody else, disabled or not.
I've been challenged as a barrister by judges. I've been put to strict proof and asked silly questions. How many fingers am I holding up? What colour's my hair? And all of this ridiculousness. And by court staff as well, which indicates to me that there's a glaring need for there to be training across all areas of the court system, from those that are ushering us into court to judges at the Court of Appeal. There needs to be training desperately. It's something that, as someone who was born able-bodied and lived the experience of disability by proxy through my brother, who also has Stargardt's, progressively much more advanced than where I am, I maintain that as disabled people, we trigger an existential crisis in the able-bodied. I'm 100% sure of that. I've had people say to me, well, if I was going blind, I'd kill myself. If I was going blind, I'd disappear, I'd do this. I don't know what you want me to say to those people. I don't think those people can be helped. I think they need to educate themselves. But what I would say is, and I entirely agree, find your support, find your people, find your community, because it can be very, very lonely if you think that you're not on your own and there is support available. Sometimes you've got to really get out there and find it, but it is there. That's why we're all here. And ultimately, when I've encountered they're stupid comments by judges as well as lay people, some of the best advice I got was that diamonds are made under pressure.
I love that.
So I'll take it from sort of a policing perspective as well. First of all, if it's a physical type thing, I'll just have 2 microphones on me. Maybe that might work. If I give you the dead one. It is that, first of all, keep yourself safe. Secondly, a photograph or a video. If somebody is doing something to you that you're uncomfortable with, pulling your phone out does a massive amount. And that's even to police officers, because they can also be naughty, as we know. And I apologise on behalf of them. We haven't got a good rap at the moment. But so that's the first thing. The second thing is that understand that what you are feeling is valid, that whether or not it meets a threshold or nothing, if you feel insulted, you have the right to feel insulted. And don't let them take that away from you. The third thing is obviously find people like yourself, somebody who has a similar experience or a different experience, but somebody who can actually talk to you about. And advocate for yourself. I've said this before, Christina might actually correct me on my advocacy skills here, but literally, what do I want? Why should you give it to me? In as simple language as possible, so that even somebody who has never spoken to you before would understand the situation. That helps, and it helps you to know what you want from them. Because a lot of the time, officers, for example, police officers, third-party reporting, will go, what do you want me to do about it? I don't know, stop it. But if you have an idea, be ready for the question, because that helps you to answer it. Third-party reporting, if you don't like the police, if you're finding it hard, if you're online, there's organisations called Stop Hate. You can organise, there's victim support, there is Race Equality First, there's probably the Equality Advocacy Service, I would guess. All those things will let you report what is going on, especially online, offline, wherever you are, in a more friendly atmosphere. Victim support can also advocate on your behalf. So if you are a victim of crime, you are having trouble with the police or somebody online that is not helping you, you can go to them, they will help you. They are not linked to the police. So that's my piece of advice. Oh, and it gets better.
What advice can I give? I think the panel has covered a lot of it, but I would say the fact that you're here, that is number one. You're here, you're taking part, you're getting involved. Getting involved is very important. Now, that sounds like common sense, but I think you'll be surprised to know that a few years ago, and it wasn't that many years ago, I was the first time that I brought myself out of my four walls and my family walls, which was essentially me and my mum. And sometimes when the people that you love, you think they've got the best advice, but actually, if they don't have knowledge, you're stuck in four walls with an experience that is not suitable. Doesn't mean that you love them any less when you connect with people outside of your four walls. So I think getting involved as much as possible is a good idea. I can give you an example of the fact that 3 years ago, I wasn't active or connected to any of these lovely people on LinkedIn. I had no clue who I was, what I was doing. I didn't know the Shore Trust existed so that I could get help when I needed to take my company to court, but it wasn't court, it was before that stage. And that takes me to the next advice is research. We're so lucky that we have Google in front of us. Do your research before it gets to that time that you need the help, and make that list of organizations that you feel you might need at some point, and hopefully you won't need them. So that's the second piece of advice. And I would say also, this isn't an advice, but the councils and the government and all the ministries need to be responsible, because maybe again you'll be surprised to know that in 2012 I was nearly made homeless because I got a job. After my job I got very sick, my benefits wouldn't come in for a year, and then they were hounding me instead of helping me. So I think educating the local councils and the local workers, I mean, the answer from the rent retrievals officer was, it's not my job to care. But it's not about you caring. I don't want special treatment. It's about you understanding my circumstance and you making a mess, and therefore me being left to go to court because you're taking me to court because I can't pay my rent, because you're not giving me my benefits in time. And you fall through the sieve of what the government and the surroundings are. And I would say, don't leave it to luck. Back then, I was lucky for someone to knock on my door and say, I'm help on your doorstep. That's what they're called, they're in Islington. And we do everything for you. And I said, everything what? Just everything, any problems you had. And I only got help because they supported me. They did the calls, they did the conversations, they did everything for me. But it was lucky. That's my last advice. Don't leave it to luck. See who you have in your communities that could help you. I didn't know they were in the local community centre. Get yourself out there.
Thank you so much, everybody, for providing some fantastic viewpoints and coming from such diverse perspectives as well. I think it's really helpful that we hear across the spectrum of experiences, from dealing directly with organisations to working from a policy perspective to working from a legal perspective, and your own personal experiences and the work that you're doing now in crime. So thank you very much to all of our speakers, and I hope you've enjoyed this session. If you want to follow any of us up, all our details are on the Expo website and in the pamphlet. So if you want to ask us any questions, then flag us down for the rest of today or contact us online. I'm sure all of us would be happy to answer any additional questions that you might have. So thank you very much to everybody.